Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, everyone. This is Laura Smith on Blog Talk Radio. Good morning. It is 6 o'clock here in the morning on Friday morning, May the 6th. I'm glad to be here. This is One Child Abuse Survivor to Another. We're on for 30 minutes. It's a live internet streaming radio broadcast from blogtalkradio.com. Chat room is open, and I did pop the link in there, what I wanted to talk about, and continue talking about Robert Burney's webpage is called Joy to You and Me on healing.about.com. There's a whole lot of good info on there. I don't know how much we'll go through, how many of the topics and different info we'll go through, but I just kind of want to take a look at it because it's good stuff, and nobody has to say there about most of it. So thanks for tuning in. I really appreciate it. I'm just a private citizen. I'm not a counselor or therapist or anything like that. This is just my healing journey really here in the morning, one child abuse survivor to another. I just wanted to be another voice out here speaking out against abuse and talking about abuse, and for adult survivors, just another voice for people to hear from somebody else and some validation, or just to know that you're not alone. You know, it's very sad. So many people really feel that way. I know I did for a long time, and until I started to reach out, right? So that's why I'm doing these shows. You have to listen at your own discretion. I'm talking about abuse, and abuse is a sensitive subject. A lot of people might find it uncomfortable, especially if you haven't heard a whole lot about abuse. I lived my whole life like this, so I don't mind, hearing about it or talking about it, but I know some people, it's actually very sad, but it doesn't bother me. I've had to deal with this my whole life. But for some people, who haven't had to deal with abuse and really never were abused and didn't know anybody who was abused, and it can be kind of disturbing, you know what I mean? So you have to listen to all of my shows at your own discretion, really, and make sure it's something that, you're okay to listen to and you feel comfortable with the material, because ultimately it is your discretion to know what's good for you to listen to. So everyone has to listen at their own discretion. And young people under the age of 18, I just ask that you have permission to listen to my shows, because I just believe in protecting children at all times. And, there's a lot of adult content on my shows, and I'm talking about abuse, and it's a scary subject, and I think that young people should have someone listen to the show with them so they can help them make a decision, whether they should be listening or not. So thanks, everybody, for tuning in. I really appreciate it. I'm going to get right into this here this morning, and this is really some good stuff. This particular page from Robert Burney, healing.about.com. It's called "Learning to Love Ourselves" by Robert Burney, and he's a I'll just give you his information here. He's a codependency therapist, spiritual teacher, and author of a book called Codependence: The Dance of Wounded Souls. And no, I don't have that book, but I'd like to get it. But he has bits and pieces of it on his website from his book, excerpts from his book, and it's really good stuff. So hopefully you'll check this webpage out. Anyway, these web pages are pretty good. I like what he has to say about here, learning to love ourselves. He says, it is almost impossible to go from critical parent to compassionate, loving parent in one step. To be our own, our own loving parent, right? To self-nurture, to self-soothe, to go back and do some of this, get some of this stuff that we didn't get as children, right? So that we can learn how to love ourselves, right? And it says that the first step often is to try to observe ourselves from a neutral position or a scientific observer perspective, looking in from the outside, kind of as a third party, or that's what I did, or sort of taking a look from the outside at ourselves and what happened and why we're feeling the way we are and whatnot. It says this is what enlightenment and consciousness raising are all about, owning our power to be a co-creator of our lives by changing our relationship with ourselves. And we can change the way we think. We can change the way we respond to our own emotions, he says. And we need to detach from our wounded self in order to allow our spiritual self to guide us. And we are unconditionally loved, and the Spirit does not speak to us from judgment and shame. So this is what he's talking about. And, I was going into that yesterday, especially yesterday and the day before, just talking about, having to learn how to change the way I felt about myself and life and everything else, and it's been a journey, that's for sure. And, I still have days that are kind of hard, you know what I mean? Like some days I do better than others. Depends on what's going on in my life. Right now I've got my sweetheart in the hospital because he, my partner of 16 years, my boyfriend, he has liver disease. It's terminal, and so he's been fighting this for a long time. But 10 years ago, he was diagnosed terminally ill. And so, we were living together at the time. It was quite devastating. I did write about it in my book, A Life of Death, The Redemption. And, it was pretty harsh. He was diagnosed on Valentine's Day, which was horrible. but he had the test done just prior to Valentine's Day in 2001, and the results came back, and it was that he was terminally ill. So Valentine's Day, he had to go see the doctors for the results, and he came out on Valentine's Day, and he's like, I'm dying, and I was just like, oh my God, this threw our world into a chaos and a whole lot of problems, but we decided, okay, if we're gonna fight this thing, we're gonna have to we're gonna have to believe, that you can do it first of all, and we'll just live one day at a time, and we'll just go with it, right? So that's what we've done for 10 years. And he was diagnosed with 2 to 5 years to live, and 10 years later, he's still here. So he's in the hospital right now having some complications, and just due to his liver failing, all kinds of things wrong with his body because of this. And he just found out yesterday he's on the waiting list for the first liver that comes in if it's compatible with his body and stuff, which he's already been on the list for 10 years. So, but he had turned some opportunities down and then found out it was a good thing because they didn't screen the livers properly. So, this has all been quite an interesting road. But, this kind of stuff could throw you for a loop, and anybody, right? And so if you're already feeling down because you're, a survivor of abuse and just having a hard time with confidence in life and trying to have a good feeling about life, and then all of a sudden, maybe you're ill or somebody is ill or whatever, and physical illnesses come to play in this, and it can just really bring you down. And I mean, it's hard to be positive in these types of situations, right? It's kind of like, well, this is just a drag, but life throws these things at us, you know what I mean? And so for myself, like as a survivor of child abuse, not only have I had to deal with all this stuff from the past, but all these crazy things happen to people in life, and they do continually happen, not to everybody, but and not maybe to such an extreme. My life has been full of extremes in every way, and so I've had to really learn how to cope, how to adapt, how to stay sane in situations that really could drive somebody over the edge. You know what I mean? As far as becoming down and depressed and just feeling like this is just not worth it, and it's hard. It is hard, but we have to. What it's done is taught me a huge lesson, and that is that there's people out there suffering all around the world. I'm not the only one, and when there's things going wrong with me, there's a million things going wrong with everybody else too, and we have to learn how to cope with these things and deal. So my attitude for the last 10 years that I've really tried to keep, even though there's been some days where it's been a little bit hard, because like I said, even 4 years ago, my sweetheart had moved out and I was on my own again, and I was depressed and lost my best friend as well as a really good job, and had to move into to an apartment, and I was sitting around by myself, bummed out again, thinking, this is worth it, So I was actually ready to self-injure 4 years ago. I mean, this is after my sweetheart moved out. We're still together. It's not like we were completely away from each other. He just moved out to his own place, but we're still very much together. And so even in knowing that, my attitude went right downhill again because of pretty much of my past, because I've had so much to deal with. And that's where I decided, I thought, man, I was sitting there planning my suicide again, thinking, I want out of this pain. I just want out of this pain. Every type of pain you can think of, spiritual pain, emotional pain, the pain in my heart, the pain in my body, I just want out. So this was 4 years ago, and I right about to this month actually, was back down in a depression and a real deep funk. I was miserable and just in so much pain, right, from my whole life, just looking at the whole thing and saying, this is just horrible. And something just told me, no, you have to hang in there, you just have to keep going. And I thought to myself, if I do this and I actually destroy my life, all I've done is let my parents win this fight. So I talk about that a lot. And then shortly after that, I made a commitment to myself. I said, no, I will not ever plan my suicides again. I will just, if something in me just said, no, you have to fight, you have to fight, you have to fight. Because I'm always telling my sweetheart who's dying, you know what I mean, we have to fight this. See, so I can't be a talker, tell somebody, oh, well, we have to fight this, and then myself on the other side of it sitting there saying, oh, is it worth it? And you know what I mean? So in other words, you got to be able to walk the walk and talk. If you're going to talk the talk, you got to walk the walk, and whatever the saying goes, you know what I mean? However that saying goes. Like, you can't give out good advice and then you yourself do the opposite, right? So I'm sitting here in my mind going, I've been a fighter all my life to be here anyway, And my sweetheart's a fighter, so here I am telling him we have to fight, we have to keep going, we have to find something to enjoy ourselves in this life, to find some joy in people and in our lives, right? So here I'm telling him this to try to keep him going, bolster him up, and in the back of my mind I'm sitting there thinking, how am I going to get out of this pain, right? So 4 years ago I made a commitment to myself. I said, never again. I'm going to heal. I'm going to have a good life. Because I know it's totally possible and I know it's doable, and sitting around feeling sorry for myself is not going to get me anywhere. And, I need to, not allow my parents to win this fight and not to allow the abuse to win this fight. That's why I got busy 4 years ago and decided to go begin my healing journey, to allow myself to heal. And I'm thankful that I made the right choice, made the right decision for myself, really, because I'm so much better now than I ever was, and able to handle things so much better now than I ever could, just because I've allowed myself to heal, to talk to people. It's not that I'm completely on my own. I have a lot of good friends who are very supportive. You know what I mean? I've talked to lots and lots of people. I've talked to a few counselors and therapists. I've never had any official sessions, but just because of what I'm doing, I've managed to talk to a few, and they're all very nice and thoughtful and helpful, and I feel a whole lot better than I did 4 years ago. I tell you that. And so, we have to be in control of this, and we have to change the way we feel and we think. I could easily just, be like my brothers and just throw in the towel and say, oh, well, it's just too much. I can't handle it. My mother did that. My mother was suicidal. My dad was suicidal. My dad was actually always attempting to kill himself, really, but my mother was always talking about it. And, two of my brothers killed themselves, you know what I mean? And it just seemed like an option, and to give up. Even if I didn't kill myself, just to give up. Just to sit down in the middle of the floor and say, that's it. I'm giving up. And, and it's just too easy. It's just such a cop-out. You know what I mean? To do that. It's like, no, it wasn't put here on this earth to give up, right? And so I have a fighter spirit inside of me, and I'm telling you, that's the only reason why I'm still here. And so, something tells me to keep going, keep going. There's going to be bad days. Right? I know my sweetheart's terminally ill. I mean, nobody lives forever, that's for sure. But this has been a hard road for him, to watch him suffer like that, you know what I mean? And to watch him physically and spiritually and in every other way go down, you know what I mean? This disease is, I think about it quite often because I see him quite often, and I'm his caregiver, really. And so, to watch this disease take his life every day, a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more, taking my sweetheart away from me, you know what I mean, is horrible. And, I could easily let that get me down on top of this whole issue of being abused and no support from my family. And I guess if I went crawling over there to my family and saying, oh, it's my fault, I'm sorry, and apologize to my dysfunctional, abusive family, they would all, they still wouldn't support me, right? They're not supportive. So, it's just too easy just to look at the negatives. It's too easy to just say, oh, well, it's not worth it. And, it's like, forget that. You know what I mean? Like, it is worth it, and we do have to fight through this stuff. And if we're going to allow some bad times to drag us down, then that's just a cop-out. Because everybody experiences bad stuff, from illnesses and car wrecks and everything else, and deaths in the family, and, loss of houses and loss of jobs. Some people are in wheelchairs. I mean, some people blinded. I mean, people have had some terrible things happen to them, but we cannot give up. You know what I mean? Because we have to keep. The whole idea is to keep, because through we're going to have to experience some of these bad days and bad times, right? And then, but through that, if we keep going and we change our attitudes and our hearts, we can experience some really awesome times. Had I given up years ago, I wouldn't have been able to experience this awesome relationship with my sweetheart. Who I love him. He's my man. You know what I mean? And he's an important part of my life. And so I have to be able to not sit around and be depressed all the time, because that just ruins my time. And it's like with him. So we decided that we wouldn't let this disease get us down. And that we would just carry on day to day. And he's still here 10 years later because of his attitude. I really believe that. Because he's a fighter and he doesn't sit around feeling sorry for himself. He's in a lot of pain all the time. And he just keeps going and keeps going and keeps going. And he's like, well, maybe tomorrow will be a better day. you know, and that's what we have to do as survivors. I mean, that's what we have to do. We have to say, well, maybe tomorrow's a better day. We have to wait. We have to learn how to change the way we feel and the way we think about things. And I think it's very important. So I like what he has to say here. And he says one of the visualizations that has helped me over the years is an image of a small control room in my brain, he says. And this control room is full of dials and gauges and lights and sirens. And in this control room are a bunch of Keebler-like elves whose job it is to make sure that I don't get too emotional for my own good. And whenever I feel anything too strongly, including joy, happiness, and self-love, the lights start flashing, the sirens start wailing, and the elves go crazy running around trying to get things under control. They start pushing some of the old survival buttons. Feeling too happy, drink. Feeling too sad, eat. Eat sugar. Feeling scared, get laid, or whatever. So this is what he's saying, is that we need to get control of some of these emotions that really take us a little bit too far one way or the other. That's if people are experiencing this kind of stuff. I know myself, I've always been emotionally damaged because I grew up in the family, the home that I grew up in, with the emotional, psychological abuse, the physical abuse, just watching the violence, just being a part of the violence and being forced to endure this my whole life as a child, as a youngster, as a youth and teenager. I've had definite problems with my emotions, and for the longest time, especially as a young person, I was very much emotionally disturbed. And but I was I had a good nature, so that's good, but still I had some problems in my teen years when I rebelled, but mostly I just crying and just being miserable and not able to come out of that funk. And even a few years ago, I would be crying and I'd just be like, how am I going to ever stop crying? I think I'm just going to cry here forever, and just by myself on my own, right? And just cry and think, well, I'm going to get over into the area where I won't be able to come back from this. That's the grief and the sorrow and the that was in my heart, really just needing to come out. But you got to be able to control that to a certain extent, because if it's important in order to move forward. You know what I mean? We do have to at some point kind of close off the taps a little bit and move on, and maybe allow ourselves to open the taps, let some of it out a little bit here, a little bit there, and then shut it off for a while and then close it, because otherwise it's just too much. I mean, my God, it's even too much for me. I'd be sitting around after an episode like that thinking, this is too much for me. So I can imagine if somebody else was in on this, having to put up with this, because this is what my mother did, this is what my dad did, this is what my family did, way out of control with their emotions and serious problems. You know what I mean? So I've had to learn how to cut myself off at certain times and just say, okay, that's enough of that for now. We got to get busy. What I do is I generally, if I have a day like that and I'm just feeling really emotionally down, because especially with this kind of stuff, my sweetheart's in the hospital again, and he fell and hurt himself, and the hospital's saying, well, he can't feel his feet, and what are we going to do, and all this stuff. I got all this other stuff going on, and I'm extremely busy, and I'm tired, and I hurt myself not too long ago, actually about 4 or 5 months ago, and now it's the injury's infected, and I'm going to have to take myself to the clinic, right? When I'm going to do that, I don't know, right? Because I got to work this weekend. So all this stuff just starts to build up, and you start feeling like, oh my God, and it has to come out somehow. You release these feelings and this tension and uptightness. And I'm sitting there the other day just kind of crying, and I thought, well, okay, you're only allowed to cry for a few minutes because you got things to do. You can't sit here and cry for the whole day away because you're too busy. So, these little, kind of when I've been able to do, sort of manage it by just saying, okay, I'll allow myself to feel things, you know what I mean, and to go through some of these emotions and have a little cry if I need to. Nothing wrong with that. Everybody needs to cry sometimes. And, but then I have to pick myself up and say, okay, that's enough. Whereas I used to actually not do that. I would just sit and cry for days and spend, days just, I'd have to sometimes go to work and then pick up the session later that night after I got home from work, and I'd just start over again, and that's just way too hard on a person. But I know that sometimes we need to be able to get some of these emotions out and some of these feelings out. So, but I would make sure that, you get some help. Like if you're really suffering with this and you just think, how am I ever get over this? You make sure you do reach out and get some help, because, talk to somebody, anybody, because it's so important, right? And he says, to me, the process of recovery is about teaching those elves to chill out, reprogramming my ego defenses to knowing that it is okay to feel the feelings, that feeling and releasing emotions is not only okay, it is what will work best in allowing me to have my needs fulfilled. So he says we need to change our relationship with ourselves and our own emotions in order to stop being at war with ourselves. And the first step to doing that is to detach from ourselves enough to start protecting ourselves from the perpetrator that lives within us. So we need to be able to kind of take a look on the outside so we can see what's going on the inside. So I think that's quite interesting what he said there. And the next portion of this was loving the wounded child within, which we already read this out like about 2 weeks ago. So what I wanted, I wanted to kind of go to the next section, and that was looking at boundaries. His work on and take on boundaries, right? See if I can find that. Or maybe that link. Maybe he doesn't even have that link. Because when you go to the sitemap on healing.about.com, he's got a sitemap there. And he's got one that's, the next portion of this was the boundary work. But maybe that link is actually not working properly. But anyway, yeah, this is, it's hard. It's hard on people and everybody. Like I have to kind of, what kind of keeps me grounded is realizing that I'm not the only one, dealing with things, right? Like there's a world full of people that are suffering. There's a world full of people that are having problems. Not everybody's on a great path of a great life, and it's I think that sometimes it helps to keep a perspective, right? Because I'm not the only one who's out here having problems, and for me to just let that destroy me just because, oh, woe is me, poor me. That's how my parents were. My mother was especially like that. She was manic depressive, and the whole world was just falling down around her. She was the only one suffering. She didn't care about the rest of the family. My mother, that was the problem. Like she didn't really care that her children were suffering, and that her sons were doing drugs and in prison and having overdoses and almost dying and things like this. She didn't care about that because she was really mostly concerned with herself. So she was unable to see that, she didn't even care about me, the abuse that she was putting on me, the physical abuse, verbal, all the abuse that she was dishing out my whole life with her. She could not care about that. She couldn't care about me. She couldn't care that she was hurting me because she was hurting so deeply that she was not able to empathize with anybody else, which is kind of sad, but it's true. Like she was very selfish as far as her feelings went. She was just thinking about herself all the time. My oldest sister, who's 18 years older than me, actually pointed this out to me a long time ago when we were talking about our mother one time, and she said, I grew up with Mom too. I grew up with the same mother you did, and she said, my sister's passed away now. She passed away from cancer a few years ago. She says, I grew up with her too, and she says, you don't know a whole lot about what was going on before because before you were born, you wouldn't know, and you only probably know bits and pieces of what siblings have told you and whatnot, and what Mom has told you or whatever. And she said, we had to deal with her, in the same way you're having to deal with her. She hasn't changed. Nothing's changed. You know what I mean? Like my mother was abusing all of us, not just me, right? But she had a special place for her sons, so she didn't really pick on her sons too much. But her daughters, she didn't care for her daughters and didn't have that love for her daughters, right? And so, my sister was telling me, that my mother was very selfish with everything when she was growing up, when my sister was growing up under her, and that she was selfish with everything, her love, her care, her attention. My mother was just a selfish person. Like she couldn't love her children properly. She couldn't love anybody because she was so wounded. She was so destroyed herself. And so, in doing that, in being like that, if we take on those attitudes and that role, how are we ever going to love anybody if we can't find peace and make peace with ourselves and with our life and with life itself, right? It's nearly impossible to really be able to help somebody else or love somebody else if we're not willing to do the same for ourselves. And so that's why it's very important for people to realize that really it's sort of a mirrored reflection. You know what I mean? It's like, if you want to have love in your heart for other people, you got to have love in your heart for yourself. It's like if you want to feel good about this life, for other people, you got to feel good about this life for yourself. And so, parents who are self-destructive and always talking, a bunch of misery and depression and stuff like that. What they do is they mirror that reflection to their children, and that their children become worthless to them. And the children, in the children's minds, they don't mean anything, and they don't count, because obviously the parents are so wounded that not even the child's life can make that parent happy, or bring any kind of peace to that parent, kind of good feelings, or that life is good, right? And so when you come from a family of 7 siblings and not one of us could help could be that for our parents, you realize that our parents, then you realize the reality sets in later when you get older and more cognitive, that you don't count and matter to your parents, because nothing does. And when that's a reality, that's a very sad place to be. And that reality, especially when your parents tell you that is exactly the truth, and throw it in your face that you were not wanted, and you were not that you should have died. It's like, oh, well, thanks, Mom. I appreciate that. You know what I mean? That's lovely. This is the thing, and so I myself can't go around, even though I don't have children, but reflecting that kind of garbage out on people around me, and that's why I don't do that, because it's a shame that people can't allow themselves to feel good stuff, through the bad stuff, right? My parents, they had the option and the choice to try to make a decent life for us, you know what I mean, and to try to show some care and some love, and even if the family was screwed up, they could have tried to find some sort of goodness in it and say, well, we loved our children, and we love you guys, we care about you. There was none of that, And so for me, that's why I recognized that when I was growing up, and I recognized it as a young person, and I really tried not to do that with my friends, especially because I thought my friends are worth something to me. They do matter, you know what I mean? They do count. And so that's kind of probably what kept me around, was realizing that if I do this and I self-injure, self-sabotage, or try to, plan my suicides or whatever, it's an insult to my friends. Because that's like saying, well, you don't matter, you don't count, nothing counts. And to me, that's just such a huge insult, because people in my life have, they've made such a huge difference in my life. People that I've run into, like friends, and people that I've met, how can I say that wasn't worth anything to me, or that didn't matter? But my parents were exactly like that, especially my mom. And so it's horrible. So we really have to be careful what we're doing, because without even realizing it, we can be on that course, that path of a really sad life. You know what I mean? Because the only real person that my mother hurt in doing all of that was herself, because she lost a relationship that she could have had with her children that was just amazing. Like her children loved her. All of her children loved her. And we wanted the best for our parents, even though our parents did not want the best for us. And it's bizarre, but this is the truth. And people, maybe people, if I did write a lot about it in my book, A Life of Death, The Redemption. But, like all of the siblings loved our parents. We all loved our parents, and we all wanted the best for our parents. And they did not want the best for us. And so that's, what can you do? It's just the way it is. You can't go back and change it. So you have to keep that love in your heart, and learn how to love ourselves, right? I had to do that. I had to learn how to be kind to myself, and how to think positive things about myself, you know what I mean? And so it's important, and it's actually vital, right? So do whatever you have to do, right? Whatever kind of work you need to do to get that help, right? To get yourself on a journey of some better days and some better times, you know what I mean? So I did find this actual piece here, and it's called Co-Creation Through Conscious Internal Boundaries. So I think we'll take a look at that tomorrow, and then we'll just kind of move on through. But this is looking at some boundaries and whatnot, which is the next portion of it. So thanks, everybody, for being here. I really appreciate it. I'll be back on. I'm not sure if I'll be back on tonight. Depends on how tired I am. I've just been running all week, and I'm exhausted, back and forth to the hospital and working, and it's just insane. I might be on tonight if I have the energy to do the show, but otherwise I will be on Dreamcatcher Talk Radio, right? And then I'll be back on if at some point, if not on the weekend, next week. Next week we'll resume. I'll just be back on my regular schedule next week, right? So, but I've been going for like 2 weeks, and I'm just exhausted. So you guys have a great day, and make sure you reach out. Don't allow yourself to suffer on your own, and you can call you can get involved with groups anonymously. You don't even have to give your name. You can get onto some of these groups, child abuse survivor groups and adult survivor groups, and you can get help without even having to tell anybody who you really are. And I think that's awesome because it allows you to speak to people who have been through some terrible things, and they have some great ideas on what's helped them to heal, what's helped them in their lives to be able to move forward and to feel better. And whatever you do, make sure you do reach out and get some help. Right? If nobody's around, you just keep. You reach out to a crisis line. I don't care what you have to do, but you stick around for better days, because there are better days. And I know I would have never believed that years ago. As a matter of fact, if somebody would have said that, I'd have been like, right. But, you just keep going, you keep going, you keep going, because that's what we have to fight this. You know what I mean? And we have to fight and to have a good life and to be able to see some goodness in this world. You know what I mean? And so I just keep going, because it does get. I believe it gets better, but only if we try. If we don't try, it will never get better. Two of my brothers proved that to me. They just gave up and killed themselves. So obviously for them, it wasn't going to ever get better, and that's really sad and pathetic, because we grew up in the same home. You know what I mean? And it's like, come on, man, where's the fight? You know what I mean? It's like, no, we have to do this, and we have to stick around. So whatever it is that stirs up on the inside of you, the will to continue to go forward through the bad stuff, you can get the good stuff, because there is better days out there, right? Have a great day, everybody. Talk to you later.